If you can drive and you can drink and you're allowed to legally do those things, you have a moral obligation to yourself to excavate, to sit down and take these messages and figure out whose voices they are, first of all, which ones are still relevant to you, which ones you want to keep, and which ones you want to discard. So, even something like oral sex, there are many cultures in the world in which it's like, oh, I can't do that. I know men that tell their girlfriends, oh, you can't go down on me because that's the mouth you kiss my children with. Fine, if that's your value system, but just make sure that it's yours.
This is episode number 603. We reached our 600th episode just a few weeks ago, and I'm excited to speak with Kaamna Bhojwani. She is going to talk about intimacy in the golden years. And we've had the Golden Bachelor, we've talked about people who are aging, and I work with women over 40 and men over 40 in their dating and relationship lives, and the topic of intimacy comes up a lot. And so I'm excited to have this conversation. But before I do, I wanted to welcome you back to Last First Date Radio, where we believe it is never too late to go on your last first date. And to support you on your journey to lasting love, I have written 2 books, working on my third. I'm excited about the third, actually. The third one is about people who found love later in life. And I've interviewed about 15 couples who sometimes found love for the first time in their 50s. I have one of my couples is getting married for the first time in Ireland in her late 50s. I have couples who never found love, even though they've been married before, but then they found this amazing relationship. So that's a really exciting book. But the first book I wrote is called what's it called? Becoming a Woman of Value, How to Thrive in Life and Love. And I wrote this book because I had played small most of my life, and I really didn't know how to value myself first. And so this is a book for you, whether you're in a relationship or not. It will help you to really learn how to show up, stand up, and speak up in your life in a way that helps you to thrive and not just survive. And the second book is called Choice Points in Dating. And this book was written because I saw so many people felt disempowered in their love lives and didn't really know, number one, that they were at choice in every aspect of dating, but also what those choices might be. And so how you think about dating, how your mindset shift is so important in your dating world, and who you choose, how you do online dating, how you do offline dating. It is a handbook for dating. So both of these are available on Amazon for Kindle or paperback, and Choice Points is now available as an audiobook as well. This week's tip on becoming a woman of value is step number 10, which is forgive yourself and others. We often go through life holding on to resentment of others, which poisons us. And we also go through life not able to forgive ourselves. So both of these are important. And so my challenge to you this week is to, if you are holding on to resentment of an ex or somebody in your life, just let it go. Take one step towards letting it go. It doesn't help you. It doesn't help them. It holds you back. Also wanted to invite you, if you're not yet a member of my Facebook group, Your Last First Date. It is a place for women who are over 40 and who want to go on their last first date. It's a place of support, which is rare in the world of Facebook groups that are out there for singles. And we have very strict guidelines. I run this group like I run my life, like I run my dating practice, with boundaries, with tips, with moving forward. So if you're interested, join us at Your Last First Date. And now for my guest. Kaamna Bhojwani is a Columbia University educated sexuality expert. She helps couples and singles enhance their relationships and well-being. She has a master's degree in spiritual psychology. She offers a unique perspective that combines academic knowledge with real-world applications, and she makes complex topics accessible and engaging. Boy, that's a hard word to say, complex topics. She has been at the forefront of addressing society's most taboo subjects, from sexless marriages and infidelity to the intricate connections between mental health and sexual well-being. Welcome to the show, Kaamna.
Thank you so much, Sandy. Thank you for having me. I'm thrilled to be here.
You told me before we started that you're out there, you're single, you're dating. Are you recently divorced? What's your story?
Yeah, I was in an 18-year marriage, and I'm in the process, almost at the tail end of getting divorced. And the game changes on you. I didn't know that. There were no dating apps the last time I was single. I got married when I was 25. And I did have to go through that moment of, oh my God, am I too old? I have two kids. Is that going to be a liability? And I have to be honest with you, Sandy, it didn't take me much to transform those potential pitfalls into plus points. But it took a conscious moment of me sitting down and saying, this is who I am. This is the woman, like you said, being a woman I value. And this is what I'm going to put out in the world. And hopefully I will attract something worthwhile accordingly.
So, what did you do to change those beliefs?
I fundamentally had to reinforce the uncompromising love that I have for myself. I had to sit down and I think that when you get divorced, people think that you're broken and you're damaged. And there have been stories of that on both sides, men and women. And I had to change that story and really be like, no, no, I'm working. I'm working to actively change my patterns. I'm working to choose differently, to choose better. I'm working to show up as a more substantial partner, clean out my own baggage. Let's not pretend we don't have any mom, dad, whatever your story is. And that then gave me more confidence in terms of I can be someone really meaningful to someone else.
Yeah, and that's great that you can see that because so many people walk around with that broken story. And
Sure.
I don't believe that any of us are really broken. I think we get wounded and
Yeah.
we have our heart broken and we
Mm.
make mistakes, but we also have to go through a journey to get to where we are. One of the beautiful parts about writing this third book I'm writing is to see that these people are mature. They have
Mm.
gone through relationship heartbreak. Many of them have struggled for a very long time, but they're now at a point in their lives where they know what matters. And I think that is such a big part of it, what you will and won't tolerate, things like that. And I mean, you're still young. You said you're 44.
44.
Yeah. So I got divorced when I was close to 50 and I
Yeah.
felt really old and that no one's going to ever want to see this body because I had birthed four kids and I had, saggy parts of my body that weren't the perfect 20-year-old
Sure.
body that I had, which I didn't believe was perfect back then. So yeah, so the whole aging process of, we've been through labor and delivery, all these things. So how did you work through some bodies? Did you have any body issues that you were concerned about somebody seeing you naked
Sure.
again?
Sure, of course. I will say this. There are two things that I come into play, and I think they can come into play even when you're in a partnered relationship. If you haven't been divorced, if you haven't been through a breakup, any of that, which one is complacency, where you just, for the sake of yourself, you don't continue to evolve and grow. And I think that sometimes people who are in long-term partner relationships, they sort of fall into that because they're like, you know what, I'm here and it's not broken, so I don't have to do anything more to grow. And the other thing is a victim mentality. Everything was done to me, and therefore I can just sit here being angry or resentful or whatever. And I think, like I said, I think those can happen in any paradigm as human beings. So we have to continue to evolve and grow spiritually, emotionally, physically, um, across all of those dimensions. In terms of body image, I mean, like you said, I was criticizing my body when I was 20. For me, Indian girls, we have a lot of hair. So it was always the hair issue. Like, oh my God, I can't go out because I've got a stray errant hair on my arms and stuff like that. And some of that still comes back to haunt me a little bit. I've had two kids. And I joke with them. I'm like, don't you put anything on me. What do I say to them? I pee when I laugh because of you, right? That sort of thing. It just comes down to I'm so proud of what my body has done. And I challenge myself daily to do something that is deeply pleasurable for my body, which is so rare in our time when we have to move all the time. And there's so much guilt associated with even taking a bath. right? Touching yourself with a feather, just stuff like that. So I'm not sitting here masturbating all day as much as I would like to, but I do like to celebrate how how sensory we are as much as I can.
You said so many good things, that so many people have remained complacent throughout their lives and have had this victim mentality that it happened to me. And you see a lot of that in the dating world when you start going on dates and people are saying, oh, my relationship ended because that person was a horrible person, or they did this
Right.
to me, and there's no growth and there's no learning. And I personally don't want to date those people because I don't want to date people who have a victim mentality and people who are stuck. And we all have the ability to see, okay, I played a part in this too, and I can learn. And that is so empowering when you know that there are tools that you can learn, you can do better. So I love that you bring that up. And that whole growth mindset is so sexy. That's really attractive. I think if people saw that more, like telling somebody you went to therapy or you did work on yourself is sexy. So I wanted to put that out there. And then you talked about the whole body thing and that you challenge yourself every day to do something to celebrate your body, to celebrate the sensuality. So you mentioned bath, you mentioned feather, you mentioned
Mhm.
masturbation. What else do you do?
Music. I'm a dancer.
Mm,
And no matter how crappy my day is, I know that if I put on music and I move, it's a celebration. It is the kind of, ecstatic joy that I experience only through my body. And it's acknowledging that being in nature, whether it's the ocean or it's walking in the mountains and letting a soft breeze sort of graze through you. One of my favorite books is The Soul of Sex by Thomas More. And Thomas More was a monk. Of course, he's a spiritual guide and a very prolific author. But that entire book, of course, is about let's break sex away from this arbitrary morality and this idea of sin and good and bad, but also acknowledge how you can just live as an act of love. And he talks about that, the relationship with nature, just being out in relationships, in existence, and how beautiful that is.
mm, interesting. So a monk understood
Mm,
that.
absolutely. Absolutely.
A lot of people reach this point in their lives where they might have been married for a long time. Their sex life wasn't very good. Um, I always talk to people about what was it like, even if they've had a loss, like they're widowed. A lot of people have this false belief that if you are widowed, you had an amazing relationship and it's going to be hard to replicate that in another person or to find love again. And a lot of people really didn't have the greatest relationship. They just had loss, or they had a good relationship, but maybe sex was missing for a long time because of illness. And my friend was just telling me about a good friend of hers who had a similar situation, and now she's dating somebody who is so sexual, and she doesn't even know how to give a blowjob because her husband didn't like blowjobs. And so my question for you is, what kind of advice do you have for people who are now just learning that sex is actually quite a big topic? There's a lot of parts to it and they've never experienced it.
It's a scary place, huh? Because it's so vulnerable and it's so naked, literally and of course metaphorically. So there are two parts to this. One is if you have the opportunity and you have the courage, you get to introspect. So much of how we behave as adults has to do with sexual scripts we learned when we were children and infants and adolescents, things we took in consciously and unconsciously. And if you're a grown adult, and like I tell, people that my followers as well as people I coach, I'm like, if you can drive and you can drink and you're allowed to legally do those things, you have a moral obligation to yourself to excavate, to sit down and take these messages and figure out whose voices they are, first of all, which ones are still relevant to you, which ones you want to keep, and which ones you want to discard. So, even something like oral sex, there are many cultures in the world in which it's like, oh, I can't do that. I know men that tell their girlfriends, oh, you can't go down on me because that's the mouth you kiss my children with. Fine, if that's your value system, but just make sure that it's yours. That's my number one thing. So sit down, introspect, excavate, clean out the stuff that you don't want to keep in your life. You're an adult, it's your prerogative, you get to do that. The second piece is, I think, approaching relationships with honesty and with curiosity. Hey, you know what? I haven't done a lot of this. How do you like it? Will you teach me? It's a very vulnerable place to be, but that's when you really get to the juice, I think, of any relationship, of any intimate space.
Yeah. Well, dismantling old beliefs is so important. I think we're not even conscious of our belief systems. You know, we have biases, we have these unconscious beliefs that are limiting us. So that is so important. And it is vulnerable to talk about sex. I've had couples that I've worked with where they don't always talk about, you know, he assumes something and she assumes something else. And, oh, I think she's really happy. Well, she didn't really tell you she was happy because you never really asked her if she was happy. And so we have to talk about these things and we have to be open. I have another client who said she's dating somebody very sexual and she doesn't know what that means yet. So she wants to be open, but with limits. So she's got to be clear. What are those limits, right? Are they your limits or are they your mother's limits, right? Because so many of us grew up in homes where sex was taboo and we don't talk about it. And yeah, I just watched The Sopranos for the first time, and there's this whole thing about oral sex with that it was totally taboo for men to do it. It was considered a weakness.
I'm never surprised by the prejudices that I hear and
Mm-hmm.
the behaviors that are restricted or shamed because
Mm-hmm.
of it. Because all our upbringings, most of us, I mean, I would venture to say 99.9% have grown up in environments where there is a lot of shame and guilt associated with sexuality and sexual acts.
Let's take a quick break to hear from our sponsors. This episode is brought to you by Amazon Music Unlimited. You can listen to over 70 million songs and thousands of playlists and stations. Plus, you can now stream your favorite podcasts like Last First Date Radio. You can listen to any song, anytime, anywhere, on any of your devices. Get Amazon Music Unlimited for free for 30 days. Just head on over to getamazonmusic.com/last first date to learn more and claim this offer.
I specialize in sexual shame. That's what I studied at Columbia. And initially, I started interviewing people, and it's your own network. So there's a bit of self-selection. And as my social media grew, I was able to put out calls regularly for people. And you'd be surprised how many men came into my studies. And we're talking about, just high level. Tell me about sexuality. Tell me about your relationship with early relationship, childhood, etc., into current, etc., etc., etc. Shame, of course, shows up, is at the door immediately. And women, of course, feel a lot of shame. We're conditioned towards it. But the stories that men tell me about the kind of shame that they feel, like one of the things is, I don't want to ask. I'm embarrassed to ask a woman how to go down on her. But I never really learned, because guess what? I learned watching porn with my friend and his older brother, and we frankly don't know anything.
Mm-hmm.
So that idea that we're innately supposed to know how to pleasure ourselves and maybe ourselves, but our partners, I don't know. I don't think there's much accuracy to that.
No, and there's a lot of shame around self-pleasure too. I mean, the messages that came down about self-pleasuring were just awful in
Yeah,
religion, in
sure.
families. So, and porn is a whole other conversation. It's just
Sadly,
really
sadly.
people, yeah. I mean, it's become so prevalent today because it's free and it's easily accessible that people believe that's what relationships look like and feel like,
Yeah,
and
yeah.
that's not reality. And so let's talk a little bit about how people age, and you're touching on it a little bit, but let's talk about the ways our bodies change. And
Mm,
so there's a lot of shame around impotence. There's shame around women who have issues around postmenopausal sex, where there's dryness and there's
mhm.
lack of pleasure, lack of ability. I mean, there's so much. I actually just became aware of a whole specialty around pelvic floor therapy.
Mm.
And people who you mentioned, I pee when I sneeze, that there are a lot of people who pee when they sneeze, and there is
Sure.
prolapse of our bladders, and that can also get in the way of our sexual health. And so just knowing that these things exist, that we can do exercises, that we don't have to live in shame of this. But I'd love to hear more about how you would help people who are in these stages of life where they're dealing with things that are not the same as they were when they were younger.
Sure. I think first we need to acknowledge where that mindset comes from, right? The idea that a woman is only allowed to have sexual experiences and sexual pleasures through her reproductive years. That's a patriarchal notion, and we need to dispel it ASAP. The big problem is that it's also very much in our healthcare system. So just for shits and giggles, when I went to my annual checkup just a few months ago, I pushed the envelope a little bit with the RN who was just taking my vital stats, and I said, listen, I'm recently single, and I know my body's changing. I'm probably perimenopausal. What are your recommendations for me? Because I want to have a really active sex life. I kid you not, Sandy, she didn't have much to say. She looked visibly uncomfortable. And I don't mean to put her on the spot, but I think she's representative of what a lot of people experience, a lot of women experience. So when I interview women in their 50s and above who are like, listen, I want to have sex with my husband. I have a great relationship with him. I feel this dwindling. My body's changing. I don't know who and how to ask. So I think that's the first step. I think we need to acknowledge that our bodies are changing, but there are things out there we can do. And either you find your favorite, menopause sexuality influencer online and see what they're doing because they're vocal and loud and they're bringing in more people who are listening. But then you also have to advocate for yourself in your healthcare system with the doctors, with the people that are helping you transition and say, look, I don't want to lose my sexuality. Lubrication in vagina it is probably the most common complaint. And while we all know what Viagra looks like, there's not one recommendation for a lube that will work that everybody's familiar with.
Yeah, I found that doctors were terrible after after my divorce. Nobody talked to me about sexually transmitted diseases. Nobody ever talked to me about estrogen. Nobody ever talked to me about anything. And I was afraid to do any estrogen because of all the stuff that came out about hormone replacement therapy and how bad it was
Sure.
back in the day.
Yep. Yep.
And nobody ever said you can do some internal estrogen tablets or cream, and that
Yep.
will actually prevent a lot of the things the problems that people have. And it's very safe. But again, talk to your physician, find out.
Yep.
It is important to figure out what works for you,
Yep.
do the research. There's a lot of specialists online who probably are not good to listen to, and you have to know who to listen to. Any other tips that you have for people?
I think the good news is that because there are a lot of women of that age now in power positions, VCs, entrepreneurs, we're seeing more women's health and sexual health come online in terms of companies and services and products. That's very heartening for me to see. But even when it comes to this healthcare thing, I'm not sitting here all day having sex. I didn't need to go and say that to my doctor or to the RN, but going there and communicating that this is a goal, not just I want to feel better and I don't want to be sick, right? Because a lot of sex education all our lives has been about those two things. It's been about preventing pregnancies and preventing STIs, right? There's always been this negative frame around how we talk about sex. So you have to, again, address your own biases, your own shame, and whether you're partnered, whether you're single, whether you're 20, whether you're 60, be comfortable sitting with your healthcare provider saying sexual wellness is an important part of my life. Help me on this journey. So that's one. So when I work with people, men and women, for men, I have to teach them a different story. I have to teach them that erectile dysfunction is not just about their penis. We talk about the emotional components, we talk about the mental components, we talk about the spiritual components. And sometimes they find that, shit, it was a really stressful time in my life. And, I am really insecure about certain things and it affects my performance. That coupled with the medication, the drugs, etc., I think that's the winning combination. So it's continuing to have these conversations like you're having, like we're having, that I have constantly on Instagram 24/7, that I think will give people the courage, one step at a time. Every journey is unique. And, just
Yeah.
have the courage to embrace yours.
I only worked with women for most of my career. In the last few years, I've started to work more with men, and I love working with men.
Me
And
too.
for them, yeah, I think it's important to have the balance of both and to see both sides. And when a man can express to me that he's having issues with erectile dysfunction, which I actually have heard people don't even use the word dysfunction anymore. It puts a negative spin on it. And it also is like something that you can do something about. And again, it's not just penis vagina sex that creates intimacy. And I think when there's no shame about it, and that we actually work to not be complacent, those are the two things that are really important here. And I had a client who was dating somebody who couldn't get an erection, and he had some health issues that he never addressed. He
Right.
was overweight, he was on all kinds of medication,
Yeah.
high blood pressure, whatever it was, he was not addressing any of it. And she
Yeah.
was a very health conscious person. And so for a long time, it was a great relationship because he gave her things that she didn't have in her marriage, and he paid beautiful attention to her, and she was
Sure.
satisfied in many ways. And then she took this course on sensuality, and all of a sudden she's like, this is not working for me anymore. And she broke up with him. She just said, this isn't working. But he could have done something. He could have taken charge of his life and gotten in touch with his body.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, there is a direct correlation, and I studied this at Columbia, between SSRIs and sexual irregularities.
Mhm.
So clear that it should be on the boxes, but of course, it's not going to be.
Yeah.
So again, inquiring and studying and doing the research, advocacy, but putting sexual wellness and sexual pleasure as a goal on your health plans, whether you write it down or not, I think that's where it starts.
Yeah.
But I think in the world of sexuality, relationships, intimacy, unfortunately, there are no quick fixes. I think it's a deep, and if you do it right, a deeply fulfilling process of self-discovery, of self-knowledge, and then being able to show up like that for one or many partners, depending on how you'd like to play it. So I
Yeah.
would be suspicious of anything. Yes, there are fixes, like we said, the estrogen pills and Viagra in the right context, etc. But it's always a longer journey than that.
For sure. It's not a one size fits all. You also mentioned that yoga, acupuncture, and intuitive eating are really important, that you really need to listen to your body. How does that all play out in the world of sexuality, intimacy?
Keeping in touch with your body and then helping your body be its best. In that context, exercise, yoga, movement, those things are all very, very important, more and more as you age. But also in the spirit of knowing your body and respecting your body as it changes, being able to modulate up or down, I think becomes even more important. And it's also a really nice way to engage with other people. I mean, I remember one of my boyfriends when we were 20, like we would enjoy going to the gym together. And I hate going to the gym, by the way. I think it's boring as hell. But because it was something that we did together, and then you feel good about your body. And you feel good together and all of those things. But fundamentally, knowing and respecting your body is the first step, I think, to then teaching other people how to know and respect your body. So when we show up and we know what we like and we're willing to experiment, but not push boundaries beyond a point, because let's face it, as we get older, it becomes harder. I think that ties into how we age ourselves and what we attract into relationships.
I have always taken good care of myself, of my mental health, my physical health, my
Sure.
spiritual health.
Yeah.
And I just rejoined a gym in the last couple weeks, actually. I've always been active, but I did not walk into a gym for decades. And I had a lot of self-consciousness around my body and my ability to be flexible and all these things. And then I realized we are all different. And I quickly got over my insecurities. I do it just for the classes. I don't go to the equipment. I just want to do yoga, Pilates, strength building. I feel like, muscles, it's really important to keep our muscles up as we
Yep.
age. We need to
Yeah.
keep healthy. And you also mentioned that emotional intimacy is really important, which I agree. So tell us a little bit about how you see emotional intimacy interacting with our entire holistic health.
I mean, I didn't know anything in my 20s. I got married when I was 25 and I'd already been a few relationships in at that point, right? It was just kind of a little bit of jumping from one thing to another. But when you're older, whether or not you've had any relationships under your belt, I think the beauty of it is really knowing what turns you on emotionally and physically and leaning in to that. So for me, I thought because that music is such a big part of my life, when I was younger, I thought it was frivolous to want to be with somebody who loved music. Isn't that silly? I used to think, oh, banker, lawyer, whatever, looks good on paper. Now I know that somebody without an artistic sensibility, I would have nothing to say to. And I would have nothing to connect with. So when we talk about emotional intimacy and knowing that there's a sexuality component, they're very much intertwined. I think it's really about understanding how you see into each other beyond the superficial. So people will say sense of humor. I think that's a very important one. People will say compassion and kindness. People will say integrity. So you have to sort of put on your x-ray glasses and go beyond what we're so used to, what we're so conditioned to judge each other by. That's why I have trouble with dating apps, to be honest, because I don't want your resume. I don't want your portfolio. I want to feel chemistry. So I honestly, I have more fun and I have more success meeting people outside than I do on a dating app because I want to feel those non-tangibles. I don't care how successful you are, what your LinkedIn profile looks like.
One of my dating profiles said, I care more about your generous heart than what's in your wallet or something. I care more about a person's emotional EQ rather than their IQ. It's really hard to gauge that from a static online profile. It is also hard to meet people without the online dating profile. So it's that combination of the balance, but that's why I
Sure, it's a
say
balance.
meet people as soon as possible, because you can hide behind a profile, you can present yourself completely differently on a profile than in person. And that in person, the energy, and I agree with you, the creativity. I mean, I'm a writer, I'm a painter, I'm an artist in many ways. I love to dance also and sing, and I used to play guitar. Like, creativity is a huge part of my life. When someone's creative in some way, and creative thinker, creative in some way, it's just so sexy, so attractive.
But that's not for everybody, right? And I think we have to
No.
be really careful about. So, for instance, speaking of social conditioning, women are valued traditionally for their looks in our societies. That's why we struggle so much. Men are valued for their money, right? Money and power. So men will lead with their quote unquote LinkedIn profiles, how successful they are. The latest thing with me is that men will show me pictures of their children. And I'm like, I don't care. Honestly, like, I don't care about your paternal instincts. I'm a big girl. I don't need you to take care of me, that sort of thing, right? So everybody's trying to present what they think the other person wants to see. And I think, as for people over 40 and 50, if you have the luxury of making it this far and that you're not dead, I think you have the responsibility and the pleasure of presenting as yourself. What do you think? Is that too bold?
No, I think there's a couple things about what you said that are really important. If you look on online profiles, so many men show themselves with a motorcycle or with a dead fish or with the hunting that they've done.
That's also true.
And and women go crazy for this. They're like, why are they doing this? This is so ridiculous. Well, it makes perfect sense if you look at it through the lens that you just said, that they're
Right.
showing you that they can provide. They're
Strong.
hunters, they're gatherers, they're tough, they're macho, they provide for you. And women are often presenting as very airy fairy and kind of, overly feminine. And
Right.
yeah, right. And the men are like, what is this? I don't understand any of this spiritual talk that you're putting out there. So they're trying to present as the feminine. And the truth is that we're so much more than that. And women are not interested in your camouflage clothes and your dead fish. They're interested in you as a person. And so, but we don't get it. We don't get these things. And I think saying be yourself is one of the hardest things for people because we spend so much of our lives trying to belong, trying to be accepted. And when we're trying to belong, we're often not ourselves. We are some version of ourselves that is usually has to do more with people pleasing than actually being authentic. And so I think part of the dating journey involves that self-reflection about how am I showing up and what do I want, and learning from every date that this is not working, this is working, and here's why. So when I take my clients through coaching, they have to debrief every date by checking in with themselves. Is this working for me? How do I feel in my body with this person? Like you were saying, the energy. This is so important. Not do they check off that LinkedIn profile? It's how do I feel with them? Am I alive with this person? Do I feel excited to be around them? Are we laughing together?
You know, it's interesting because I was talking to a girlfriend about this just yesterday. She's a little bit older than me. And she was like, oh, my married friends, right? My married friends are always telling me that I'm too picky. What? Why would you not be picky, first of all? So she found herself going on, first dates and second dates where she's like, I could feel in my gut that this wasn't right. So I would say to all the women, please be picky and please continue to trust your gut. What that balance is between, rushing out too fast, not giving someone a chance, I don't know. It depends on every unique situation, I think. But if someone is feeling like a red flag, I would say maybe trust that.
I think people don't always know what's a real red flag and what's not. And they don't know how to get curious about things that might be a yellow flag, but might turn into a green flag. So I do believe that many people are not picky enough, but I think some people are too picky about the wrong things. And finding that balance is really important. But for other people to come in and say you're too picky means that you're not going to settle, that you're, that you're willing to just be alone instead of be with the wrong person. Well, that's not the goal here. The goal is to find somebody compatible, and you have to know yourself really well, and you have to be able to have the right conversations. I mean, I had a phone call recently with a new guy, and within a minute, I knew. I mean, it was just, I knew, and I did not stay on the phone longer than 10. And I do these screening calls so that I don't end up on dates with people that would be a waste of both our times. So
absolutely good for you. I think it's good to figure out that there are different apps that do different things. And I didn't really know that. All my friends were on Raya. So I was like, oh, I should get on Raya. And all my friends were on the League. And I was like, oh, I should get on the League. But they do have sort of an undercurrent in terms of what they're trying to help you with. So I would pay attention to that. The other thing to remember is that dating apps are businesses. It's not their ideal scenario if you're fed up and off the app. They'd like to have you back. So just keep that in mind in terms of how the algorithms work and how, in terms of the pace and things like that. I've always said, and I talk a lot about sex and technology and sex and AI, and I'm doing a little smart vibrator. I have it here, a little smart vibrator video later on. These are all tools. You have to run them. They don't get to run you. So just putting that in perspective.
Yeah, no, that's a great point. And I want to know more about that vibrator. So it's an AI vibrator? What's
it's a smart vibrator. So it basically hooks up to an app. I'm not doing an advertisement for it. Every once in a while I come across a product that I like. And this is just cool because as women, as you know, we know so little about our bodies and what gives us pleasure. So I get a kick out of sometimes I'll test it on a Sunday afternoon when I'm relaxed. It tells you how long your session was, whether or not you orgasmed, how long into it. Sunday morning versus like a Monday night when I'm really tired, when the week has already kicked me in the ass. So I'm a huge advocate of data and women learning about themselves. So that's why I told the Lioness team, I was like, look, I like it. I'm going to show what some of your stats look like. Whatever you can do to learn about yourself at whatever age you are, I think is always a plus.
Absolutely agree with you. Which brings me to my final question for you, which is what are your final words of advice for anyone who wants to go on their last first date?
I know this is easier said than done, but you've got to take the pressure off. You got to love the journey. You gotta be able to. And I know when you've kissed a lot of frogs, that's hard. But if you can manage to see something positive in every person that's on your journey and a little nugget that's been good for you, in a sense, not to say that there won't be a lot of junk that you'll have to continue to clean out. I think just enjoying the journey and being in that place of curiosity and joy might be what helps you attract that special person that you're looking for. That's my hunch.
I like that. I think that a lot of people go into dating. I mean, I did this before I got married the first time, the only time that if it wasn't going to be an immediate yes and a great match, it was a failure. And, if it wasn't my person, then the person who set us up was wrong. And how could they
Mm.
get it wrong? So, they didn't know me. And so
Yeah.
the pressure of it better be the one or it's a failure is so common. And I think if you can see it as a journey and see it as I can learn from each person and maybe they can learn from me, I think that's just a beautiful way to look at it. And again, that speaks to your growth mindset and the willingness to see it all as part of the plan. And it's just helps you to grow. It helps you to become the person that you are when you're ready to meet the right person.
But I think there's one important caveat here is that I'm very happy to be alone. And that I think is also something that it's hard when you have, if you've been single till you're 50 or 60 and you've always been alone. I get that that's harder. I've been in a paired relationship, but I genuinely know that my life is so full and so beautiful between my work and my children and my friends and my community that anything over and above that has to be complementary. It has to be additive. And if you can get to that place, then, I think that's a really wonderful place to be,
I
from which to
totally,
spring to everything else.
yeah, you want someone who adds value to your life, and you want to add value to your life first. And people don't complete you, you complete yourself, and then you find a complement.
Absolutely. Jerry
We have a
Maguire, man, they set us on the
uh,
wrong track with that "you complete me" nonsense.
terrible. There's so much bad messaging out there. Kamna, tell us how people can connect with you. I know you have a very active Instagram you've been talking about. Do you want to give us that link?
Sure. The link is Kaamna Live. So it's Kaamna Live. And I'm on every day talking about different things. Of course, for International Women's Day, I'm bringing together that's my calendar, two wonderful sexologists. And then all month, I'm going to be featuring women that I love and admire just to hear their stories.
Awesome.
And of course, I'm on LinkedIn, I'm on Threads, everything's at Kaamna Live, including kaamnalive.com.
Great. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. And just, I love your attitude, your approach, your warmth, and your openness. I think there's a lot to take away from this episode. And thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. And congratulations on 600 plus episode. Wow.
Thank
Really,
you.
thank you for furthering this conversation and for having me.
Thank you. And thanks everybody for watching, for listening. And please share this with your friends and follow us. Give us a great rating and review on Apple Podcasts. And as always, here's to your last first date. If you are ready to get unstuck, gain new tools, become more empowered, and finally find your last first date, I'd love to talk to you. Fill out an application to be considered for a complimentary half-hour love breakthrough session at lastfirstdate.com/application.